Oh, there we go. Oh my gosh, this is
What's up, guys? We're back at you with another episode of the Think Outside podcast presented by Baits.com. My name is Joey Bissing. I'm the social media manager, and I'm joined with
Charlie Peterson. I'm also a social media manager, and we got a special guest today.
we have a very, very special guest today. In my mind, it was one of the most influential bass fishing tournament catches in recent history.
Insane.
Hopefully, it was absolutely insane. We were just talking with him about it and just how unbelievably insane this is. Hopefully he can join in here in a second. But hey, Jake, how you doing, man?
What's going on?
Good. So I know you're at Pickwick now, I believe, for the Toyota event. Is that correct?
For the invitational, yes.
Invitational, gotcha. So I mean, that's insane. So you won the BPT tour. It was the stage 4, correct?
Correct.
On Chickamauga and Nickajack. Didn't even really have time to process it, and you were at Pickwick when? That night or the next morning?
That night. I got here about midnight or a little after, following interviews and all the media stuff after the event there. Super cool drive over. I have never in my life, my phone is quite busy all the time. I've never seen anything like that. I would pull it off the charger, and in 20 minutes, it would be at 10% again. It was really neat. I'm still trying to get through all that. So if anybody's listening and I haven't gotten back to you yet, I do apologize. It has been extremely time-consuming with both practice and a lot of the sponsor and obligations that come along with this. So bear with me. I will return your phone call and your text just as quickly as I can. Maybe first of next week before we get it done.
Awesome. Can you kind of describe the breakdown of this past event? So for me, I know it was on Chickamauga and Nickajack. Can you just kind of walk through and explain what went down that week, and then we'll really dive into your Nickajack event and what ultimately, why you won, how you won.
Absolutely. Yeah, so, there at Nickajack was the really unique scenario with the 2-lake, tournament or format there. Really fun. I didn't realize how opposite these lakes fished until we kind of got here. So, interesting fun fact, obviously kind of known as a TVA guy and really familiar with the lower half of the TVA. However, say from Gunnersville up, I really don't fish over there much. I've been to Chick a couple times, but only been to Nickajack one or maybe 2 other days, a long time ago. And so it was a big learning experience getting there to Nickajack and kind of dialing that place in. It sets up unlike any other lake on the TVA, very little hard bottom, offshore, and just an absolute carpet of eelgrass from about, call it 10 inches out to about 12 or 13 feet. So really unique fishery. I learned pretty quick there. So back up a minute. They actually gave us a 3rd day of practice for this particular event because of the 2-lake approach. And but you toying back and forth of I had a good practice there at Chick, but I kept telling myself, man, I'm going to be so mad if I go over and spend a bunch of time at Nickajack and don't make the knockout round. So really spent the majority of my time there preparing at Chick, even though the tournament is going to be won at Nickajack. I did get over there for about 4 hours, and again, all of this, I could say this 100 times in this conversation, but just kind of one of those meant to be. I pulled up, the sun came out, it slicked off, terrible biting conditions, but it allowed me to see what I needed to see and kind of what was going on. Those fish were cruising up really, really shallow. For the TVA and that clean of water, something that I don't have a ton of experience with, but there are more bluegill per square acre in Nickajack than any body of water I think I've ever been to. I've fished some pretty impressive ponds. That place is full of them. And so, again, I think with the lack of hard bottom and so many sunfish up, it was just a natural progression of kind of dialing in that bluegill pattern, and it really led me to victory.
Gotcha. Is that kind of what you cued in on with a buzzbait? Were you throwing anything else in practice, or was it
Yeah,
just
so
biting
a
the
buzzbait is
buzzbait?
always, when I'm shallow, it is always something that I've got tied on. Even if it's just to get them to show themselves. There are days when they just won't eat it, but in practice, I just need to know that he's there, analyze what's in that area, and kind of try to figure out why he's there and duplicate that throughout the lake. And so it's something that allows me to cover a tremendous amount of water, be really efficient with it. That Buckeye Buzzerk is a great skipping buzzbait. You kind of have to work with it a little bit, bend the blade just a hair, or the wire rather, just a hair, but it's a great bait to skip. And I was actually at another lake. I don't want to say which one because I've got a tournament coming up, and I crushed them skipping this thing under docks. It was so much fun. That blow up would echo under the dock. You could hear the water splashing up and hitting the bottom of the dock. So it's just it's a great bait to have on the deck of the boat to cover a lot of water and learn as much as you can. And really, my game plan going into that practice, again, I was really open-minded until I started to see those cruisers. And what evolved into my game plan was to put that Buzzerk in my hand, keep the trolling motor on 8 or 9, 10, and cover a ton of water until I came across some of these little, whether it were bluegill beds or just open holes in the eelgrass in, say, less than 16 inches of water. It seemed like once I got out to about 2 feet, there were still open holes out there. There were plenty of places for the bluegill and the bass to hide and kind of ambush. They just simply weren't out there. They were ultra, ultra shallow, really unique, to, again, the TVA and what I've, ever seen here, really. So it was one of those deals in practice. I was not able to, I think I did catch one, and I had one or two others that blew up on the buzzbait, but I still caught more on the D-Shed and the Cinco in practice there. The buzzbait bite really just kind of developed in the tournament itself, and
Gotcha.
it was funny. You couldn't, like, you would see these fish cruising up there, and of course, by the time I've seen them, they've all way long since already seen me, and so very difficult to get those fish to bite. And I realized you're going to have to find what he's living on a long way away and stay way back and present a bait as far away as possible to get some of those super shallow fish to eat.
Yeah. And did you figure that out on day 3? Because you said that, not winning the qualifying round probably played in your favor quite a bit.
Correct. So what's funny is, I back up a bit. I actually stopped after stage 3 at Lake Murray. On my way back home, I had to more or less drive right by Chick and Nickajack. I stopped for a day on each lake just to kind of, again, familiarize myself with it. The lakes were drawn down at that point, and you could kind of see a lot of the shallow visible cover. Goodness, I wished I'd have known what was going to transpire. I could have found a lot of these little eelgrass holes back in pre-practice, but hindsight's always 20/20. But I did find an area. It's called Mullins Creek. It's kind of got it's not really a creek per se. It's a river channel swing that's got a real vast flat, got an island that kind of protects it from the river. And the key to this area, or one of the biggest keys, was it's got a huge spring-fed creek in the back of it. So we had a ton of rain during the knockout round and the night before the championship round, and a lot of people's stuff got really muddy. The entire lake kind of turned not a chocolate milk, but a really weird kind of chalky orangey color. Not a great color at all. Again, very fortunate my area back there had that spring that was pumping gin clear water through there. Actually, funny fact, I just before I found the winning little hole there, I actually tried to get to that spring. I could see there was rapids back up in the creek back there, and of course it's got a bunch of silt out in the mouth of it. You know good and well there was one sitting back there around all that
For sure.
running water. But I tried every which way I could. I beached the boat 3 different times trying to get back there. Like beached it to the point I thought I was going to have to get out. Of course, I got a camera guy and official, all this extra weight in the boat. It was a little chaotic there at the beginning of the first period trying to get myself back there, but I actually gave up on that and trolled right to where it all happened to go down. So again, just extremely fortunate that I didn't waste a bunch of time back there and got to where I needed to be. But you know, it all kind of evolved as it progressed. So oddly enough, on I call it day 1, a knockout round, the first day we were there on Nickajack rather. I caught the majority of them. It was raining really hard, a little windy, you know, obviously really low cloud ceiling. And I caught a few on a buzzbait, but oddly enough, I caught a few on a bluegill bed. But oddly enough, I caught a lot of my fishable or fishing fish, I guess, under docks on a 5-inch Cinco. It was really weird. And again, kind of the pattern within the pattern that I learned very quickly was if I skipped these docks were great big there on Nickajack in that area. And you could skip your wacky worm under there, that little Cinco. And if a bluegill was not hitting it as it was sinking, you weren't going to catch a bass. Like you might as well just reel it back in and go to the next dock or maybe skip to the other side of the dock. But if you skipped your Cinco up under there and you line start swimming off it, you know, either direction, give it just a second because that bluegill that's eating your Cinco right now is fixing to get chased. And your Cinco is going to be the only thing left when that bass swims over there. So it was a really cool kind of a pattern within a pattern. I was able to fish really, really fast because I learned that. And I can't tell you how many docks I'd make one skip under this ginormous dock and I wouldn't get the bluegill to bite it. And I just reel it back in, turn trolling motor on high and go to the next one. But really unique in that it was cloudy and raining, and they were still in the deepest, darkest parts of those docks, and really kind of had to work hard to get your bait where it needed to be back there. And
that makes no sense if you think about it, right? That's crazy.
I know, but it had to be just where the bluegill wanted to be on that particular day. And again, I did catch some off of one bluegill bed that I found in my 4 hours of practice, and it was just kind of out in an open, you know, little area there. More or less kind of next to a dock, but not under it. And so, you know, ran with that for a little while and caught, I don't know, I think I was in 8th or 9th place after the first period and kind of got off. But I found an area in pre-practice in Mullins Creek there. It's got some standing timber. It's got a little creek channel. And they were absolutely loaded in there 6 or 7 weeks, you know, prior to our event. And I can vividly remember I was catching the fire out of them on a scope shad. Like, I mean, as fast as you could wing one out there and you can get bed. And I remember thinking to myself, boy, I would love for this to sit still, for all these fish to hang. But it's just so rare when that happens. You know, you almost just bank on things not being, you know, where they were in pre-practice. And so I was very, I guess, you know, excited to get back to that area, but I was also very understanding and fully expecting them to, you know, to not be there. However, as soon as I rolled over there were a couple fry garters. There was still a lot of fish, not quite as many, but still more than enough to catch. And so I knew I was all right in my scope period. And I felt really good about it. Going into the second period of my knockout round, you know, again, we were right there on the cut line, 8th or 9th place. But I felt really good going into that scope period. And we did our job. We caught, I don't know, 20 or 30 pounds in that period as well. And really was about halfway through the scope, the second period, my forward-facing period, I started to practice. I knew at that point I had enough to make it. Again, this BPT format, I can't say enough about, you know, the strategy. It's we're all catching them. We all understand how to catch a bass and where he's most likely to be, but it's the strategy that is really separating some of these guys. And to make the right decisions when they're needed is so important in this. And so I decided I wanted to go. Honestly, what I wanted to do was use my perspective and zoom back down some of these banks, even outside of that Mullins Creek area, and try to find more bluegill beds. Because again, that was just I was solely focused on bluegill outside of my scoping period.
Yeah.
And so I ran with that, the remainder of the second period and into the third. And more or less what I figured out, I caught several more scorables, caught a couple good ones, but it was just kind of random. I really never found that huge population of bluegill like what was back there in Mullins anywhere else. And so, again, it was so important to, to have that opportunity to practice, because it really kind of made me focus and hone in on, that Mullins Creek area. If I could make it work, that's where I was going to stay in my championship round. And so had I had that auto bid, in the qualifying round and got me straight to the championship round, I don't think there's any way possible that I win this event. So crazy, because going into it, I felt like I didn't have enough fish found. I needed to burn them all on the day that it mattered. And so, again, it just goes to show you, usually in a tournament setting, when you think you understand and know exactly what you need to have happen, it's usually not the case.
That's crazy. So this area you found with the bluegill bed, ultimately where it kind of went down for you in day 4, you found that in the first period? Is that when you found it, or was that in practice?
So I actually found that point. I didn't know it. I fished right over that the first period, the in the knockout round with my Buzzerk. Actually, I caught here it is right here. Caught 115. I wish I knew how many of those I have caught this season. It is unreal. If it's a 1.8, I'm going to catch a bunch of 1.7s. If it's a 2 pound, I'm going to catch some 115s. But I actually caught a 115, and it was pouring down rain. I mean, you couldn't see the bottom 6 feet from you. And I had no idea that I just threw right in the middle of that bluegill bed. I mean, you just couldn't see it good enough to know.
Mm-hmm.
And with it being a 115, I really didn't think, too much about it. It wasn't like it was a big one that kind of, got you honed in. Excuse me. And so I just kept right on trolling. I mean, I made a few more casts up there, but I had no idea what I had just trolled right over until I guess it was probably 30 minutes into the first period on the championship day, where I let the sun kind of get up enough. And I remembered catching that fish. It's a real obvious kind of a long tapering point. That flat or that area back there in Mullins is really flat. There's very few contours outside of the one creek channel that I was scoping in. Yet there's this one major long tapering point. So it's a real obvious place. There's going to be some bass that are related to it at some point during the year. But again, I just thrown my buzzer over it pretty good the day before and only got one bite. And so I decided to go over there and kind of poke around. And I'll never forget, for as long as I live, I shut my boat down. I stood up on the front deck and went, oh my goodness. Like I could see it all. I mean, you could be standing this far off the front deck and you knew exactly what was going to happen. I kind of trolled around, snuck over there, got in position, and my first cast was that 8-pounder. And it was just unreal. I can't even describe the emotions. And I would have given anything. I still have yet to look at any of the GoPro footage to see, but I saw, like, from the pectoral fin up, I saw that fish's head come up and get that buzzbait. I mean, she literally ate in like 10 inches of water. So she's having to like shamu it to come get it. And I knew it was a great big one. It's funny, I've rewatched the actual, Major League video, and I call it a 6-pounder. And I'm so stunned.
Yeah.
I caught a zillion 6-pounders. That is not a 6-pounder any day. I promise you. But it's so funny. I'm like, why did I say that? What was I thinking? Like, but I was in shock. I just could not believe that just happened. And man, I threw right back up there and caught like a 4 something. And it just kind of started the train and the momentum that carried me through the rest of the day. And it was really that moment when I voted that 8-pounder. Of course, I would never say it, on live or really even out loud. But in my mind, I went, "Ooh, this might be your time." Like when stuff
might go down, right?
Yeah, I fished tournaments long enough to know that feeling, and when you have something special like that happen, usually that's not the only thing that's coming that day, and it really put, if there is a way, it put a little extra motivation, a little pep in my step, and really made me push as hard as I possibly could. I knew Wheeler, excuse me, I knew Wheeler was going to catch him that day. The current generation was set up just right for him, and so I knew I was going to have to do my job, and fortunately that 8-pounder, really kind of honed me in and gave me the confidence to keep going with it.
Insane.
For sure. So what did you exactly see whenever you put the trolling motor down and really saw that area? Like, what were you looking at to be like, okay, I need to get set up right on this and ultimately catch an 8-3 on your first cast? That's
Yeah.
absolutely incredible.
It is. So it's a very highest. It's a real gradual tapering point, and at the very top of it, the very shallowest part, call it 8 or 10 inches deep. I mean, it is extremely shallow. It was like 1.2 where I was sitting, and I'm still throwing up there a little shallower. You could see the open hole there. So again, eelgrass is to me, I love any submergent vegetation that a body of water can have. Provides a lot of habitat and a lot of cover for our smaller fish to grow and help the entire chain.
Yeah.
However, it is extremely frustrating to fish, whether it's the floating eelgrass or just the vastness of eelgrass. I love hydrilla, milfoil, coontail. There's usually more changes along those types of grass. There'll be a hole, or there'll be a clump, there'll be a turn in it. There's always some sort of change that you can really dial in what these fish want. And eelgrass is just a giant carpet of grass all the way. Nickajack, it was from about 10 inches deep out to about 12 or 13 feet. Very little change in amongst that. And so this
Sucks
one
to fish.
open hole, call it a, maybe 20 yards wide by 30 or maybe even 40 yards long. It was a big hole, and one corner of it had a bluegill bed in it, but really the bluegill were utilizing that entire hole, just kind of roaming around. And every now and then, so 2 or 3 different times, I don't think that they put any of this on live, but I would actually see a bass cruise across that opening there. Once I saw him, I never could catch that one. But you could see them, and when I would reposition the boat and get up there a little closer, that's when I could see the bluegill utilizing it as well. And so it all just made sense. I mean, again, I had already dialed in that pattern of bluegill beds and little open holes, but most of my holes in the eelgrass were like, call it a 3-foot circumference. I mean, they were real small holes. And this one was totally different. It was unlike any other one that I found. And it was big enough to allow a big wolf pack of fish, almost a school of fish to get there. Yeah. Most of these little holes would have, call it 2 to 5 bass that were utilizing, a hole. However, this one, there was probably 40 or 50 of them up there. I don't even know how many scorables I caught, but I guarantee you there were a whole lot more of them than what I was, what allowed me to catch. So it was a really, really special place. And again, just that moment of standing up and going, "Oh my goodness!" you knew it was going to go down. Now, of course, I had no idea to the extent that it did, but it's like, this is exactly what I've been looking for. Yeah, you big dummy, you drove right over it yesterday. You caught a 115 and put trolling motor on high and went away from it. But again, you couldn't see yesterday or the prior day, and so I had no idea what I was even throwing my buzzbait over. Essentially, that first day, what I envisioned that I would have to do was throw that Buzzerk and just happen across a hole. Again, the visibility was so bad you just couldn't see, and so, just not knowing what was there, I just kept right on trucking and eventually ran into those docks that I caught what I caught, but no telling had I gone just a little bit further up. What I did is I threw right to the edge of that hole where that 115 was sitting. I never really threw in the actual juice of it up really, really shallow. So big, again, a big, big key, and it's something that I can't say enough about with this Buzzerk is it casts so well. I had that on a Bates Salty Hundo, which is a really, really small profile reel. they call it a hundo, obviously, 100 size, but honestly, it fits more like an 80 size in your hand. And I don't have great big hands, not a huge person, and super comfortable, but allows me to launch these baits, whether it's my D-shad or throwing my Cinco on a spinning rod. But both the D-shad and the Buzzerk were, it was super, super critical to keep that thing as far away from the boat. I caught very, very few within, call it 25 or 30 yards of the boat. Most of them were on the very end of my cast out there.
Gosh, just launching it. That's incredible.
Launching.
So I guess obviously, like I start off the podcast saying, it was one of the most influential bass fishing tournament catches in recent history. Can you just talk us through? So obviously you smashed them through what? The first two periods. When I was watching, that's what it looked like. And then it kind of started slowing down, picked up a little bit. Jacob Wheeler started catching. What was going through your mind during that whole time, and then ultimately for you to catch on your final cast? Can you just talk us through that chain of events?
So let's talk about the last 10 minutes there.
Okay, perfect.
I was really, really motivated and I guess focused would be the correct word. I started to kind of wither away on that school. I had just educated them is all it was. I'm convinced there were still a lot of them left up there. They just they'd heard me. They knew what was going on. Again, when they're this deep, it takes very, very little to really kind of get them a little weird. And there were a lot of quality fish up there. It was not like it was a bunch of rats, and they were kind of silly and easy to catch. And so by, call it the last 30 minutes of the last period, I knew I had kind of worked on this school and this little area. And I even went back to, a close bluegill bed that I had caught several scorables off of and just couldn't generate anything out of that either. And I said, I'm usually the guy that there is no telling. This sounds very arrogant, and I do not mean this in this way, but I've probably driven away from more fish than most people have ever found in their life. Like, I'm so bad about finding a good area, and if one doesn't bite in 5 or 10 minutes, I'm gone. And heck, most of the time I don't find anything any better than what I just left. So there's no telling how many times I've done that. And I remember thinking when I left that close bluegill bed, the other place, and I was giving my main little hole a rest, I almost went to a totally different area way down on the lower end of the lake that I caught a few scorables in there on the knockout round, and I thought, that is a special place. Like, don't do this again. Like, it's you don't need that much more weight. It's sitting over there. Just give them a few minutes to calm down. And so I did. I went back over there with, I want to say, like 25 minutes left. I'd given it close to 30 minutes to rest, and I caught one on my first cast, like I had been, and it went completely stale. Like, I just could not generate another bite. And I actually I picked up a jackhammer with a new little bait. I don't even know if we can talk about it. It's a prototype Jack sent me. I had 2 of them, of course, which means they were obviously going to bite it. That's the way that always works. But I had 2 little trailers for my jackhammer, and I actually kind of took, about a cast out from that hole. I just kind of got out there and started wandering around in the eelgrass and caught 2 scorables doing that. But I knew I just couldn't target. I didn't know where the next bite was going to come. Time was getting, pretty tight there. And to shorten this all up, we got down to about 10 minutes, and I knew that he was gonna catch him, catch another scoreable, and I had to make something happen. He had really chipped away at my lead there with about 30 minutes or 45 minutes. I think I had 12 pounds on him, and by 10 minutes to go, we were basically like one fish apart. I can't remember if I still had the lead. I think I still had the lead at that point with 10 minutes left, and with 6 minutes, he catches one. Ups me by 5 or 6, 7 ounces there, and I knew I had to have one more scoreable, and I will never for the rest of my life. Again, it's just the Lord was telling me the direction that we needed to go and what we needed to do, because I literally looked up and said, all right, what now? Like, I'll never forget looking around trying to analyze the whole area, because I'm like, I've burned this little hole up. Like, there's just nothing left. Whatever is in there is not about my Buzzerk anymore. He's already got a hook hole, and he's watched Judy get jerked out of there, and it's no good. So we got to do something else here.
Yeah.
And I decided, I made the decision to move around to the opposite side of this point. And I wanted to, it's kind of a twofold deal. I wanted to make a couple casts if I had time to the same hole from a totally different angle. That's something that would usually generate a couple extra bites if you've got a group of fish and they're used to seeing your bait coming from a certain direction. Cannot explain to you why that will trigger a bite. It's the same exact bait. You're fishing it the same exact way. You throw it, this way 100 times and never get a bite. The first time you ease around and throw it 180 from the opposite direction, one locks it up as soon as it gets to them. So I knew that going into it, and just from my TVA experience. And so I made the decision to move around that hole there, and I made a couple casts up there and nothing happened. It was like, okay, you got, a minute 30. And it seemed like an eternity. But again, I looked up and analyzed, and I'm like, all right, you've got time for one more cast. Like, throw it back up there where you hadn't been getting a bite, or you can turn around and throw that buzzbait back out here in just a vast eelgrass flat. Like, it's a half a football field, almost a football field sized area. I was pretty confident that there would be a bass somewhere in that zone, but I literally have time to make one cast. So we got to make this count in an area that you can't pick out. You can't, there's no zone there that tells you a bass is going to be. And again, just, I cannot emphasize enough that was not me that was making that cast there. To all the casts in the world, in my life, to make that cast on that moment, that day, it was just, an absolute blessing, and cannot give him all the credit for that. I did very, very little besides wind him in and get to celebrate with everybody. So really special moment. That fish blew up with, I think, 33 seconds left, 30-ish seconds.
Right
and I'll tell you again, it was just like, so let's back up a little bit. The emotions at 10 minutes to go was the first moment, or the first time that I had allowed myself to really let the severity of the situation set in. In other words, like, I started to let it creep in that I had an opportunity to win. Like, I knew that my job was not done. I knew he was going to catch one. In standard Wheeler fashion, as he always does. So I knew it was not like I was celebrating and giving up, but at the same time, it was like, it was hard at 10 minutes left to not kind of get some of those emotions starting to build. And I was already, I'll never forget thinking about, what's my wife and kids thinking right now? Like, I don't know how I had that, that it was only a couple seconds there but I was like, boy, I bet they are nervous. Like, I bet they're more nervous than I am. At least I can control the outcome here somewhat. And so anyway, super, unbelievable high of emotions. Like, it was just building by the second, and with every cast and every minute that ticked by, it was just like becoming more and more real. And of course, again, as I've already said, 6 minutes left, he catches one, and you talking about jumping off a cliff, like, emotionally, it was just like, oh my goodness, this is, again, I had already prepared myself for it. It was not like it was a shocker, but still, when it happens, it's a gut check. It's one of those, oh my goodness, he's going to do this again. We've got to make something happen here. And when that fish blows up on it, again, that last cast, the fish actually bit it, one of the closer fish that I caught all day, really. I mean, he bit maybe halfway back to the boat. And I was already on, again, last cast, I was already halfway back to the boat thinking, well, this was a good event. I was already drumming up what I was fixing to, how I was going to close this event out and what we were going to do on live. And she blows up on it. And she comes up again. Same deal. It's ultra shallow. What they were doing, they couldn't get up under the bait and come up like they do a lot of times. They were having to come from the side. And so you would see most all of these fish eat it. Occasionally you'd see a weight coming, but in this case, I just saw her head come out and I couldn't tell if she got the buzzbait. My line went like completely limp. And you can't really. It all happens so fast. You can't really see it in the photo, or excuse me, in the video. But I didn't think she had it. Like, I thought she missed it. And when I go to wind up tight, all I'm doing is trying to wind my bait. And I was fixing to throw a D-shad back over there, knowing I probably didn't have time to get her, but I certainly was gonna try. And when I wound down and came tight, it was just, again, like my emotion shot off like a rocket. Like, it was just holy cow, no way. This is, it was just unbelievable moment of, again, just seconds before she bit. I was, obviously a little, not upset, but a little disappointed. It's very difficult to get an opportunity to win one of these events of this caliber, and so you're trying to kind of process all of that to all of a sudden I've got a 5.5 pounder with like 28 seconds left, or whatever it was, and I have never in my life ever reeled in a 5.5 pounder as fast as what I did with that one. I literally just pointed that Dobbin 713 at him and just cranked as hard as I could. You can hear my drag slipping. I just kept going. Just flipped. I thought if I give her an opportunity, like, I wanted to lip it, but I thought if I do and she turns her head and digs, like, that's going to cost 4 or 5 seconds here that we didn't have. And so we just both flipped it. I'm starting to heal up from where that braid cut into me pretty good, but we are not complaining. I will take that all day, every day.
Heck yeah.
Didn't even let her touch the carpet either. I was so jacked up.
Grabbed her
around the line and took one for the team.
Oh, I think myself, I've watched a video 6 or 7 times. It still gives me the chills just knowing it, like, that happening. I can't even imagine what you were going through. Like you were saying, like, thinking you lost a tournament halfway back to the boat, 20 seconds winding down, and it just blows up on it and you crank him in there.
And again, like, when it blew up, I thought
that's what it is.
And then you wind up and she's there. So it's like all these emotions are teeter-tottering in a matter of like seconds. Things are firing off in my head. And again, to close it all out, like, Wheeler hooks one with 4 seconds left. Like, I don't know if that one would have won or not. I didn't really want to ask him. It's probably a, not his favorite moment ever. And so I didn't dig too hard, but it certainly looked like a really good one on camera.
It was a big one.
Yeah, it was. It was a good one.
It's incredible. We keep saying
it was just crazy watching it on our end. Like, our whole team was basically following along all day long, giving each other updates. I was watching it real close, and I'm a pretty, like, glass half full type person. I was still positive, but I was like, oh, okay, so Wheeler just took the lead. What's gonna happen? And I was still watching, thinking like, okay, and the time started ticking, and it's come down to 1 minute left, and you're kind of not quite giving up yet, but you're like, okay, so something's got to happen here. Come on, last cast, Jake. And then it actually happened. It was just crazy.
Awesome.
It's unbelievable. Again, it's just like I can't. There aren't words in my vocabulary to describe that feeling of just raw emotion, whether it's positive or negative. And look, I was not. You can't say you weren't upset. I was slightly disappointed, but hey, if we would have taken second in that event, I promise you, before the event had started, I would have been more than happy with that. We all knew Wheeler was the guy to beat here, as he is at most events, but certainly right there in his backyard. And
for sure,
I honestly, going into the tournament, I was really, and I don't want to say this and it sound negative towards MLF, because I love the 2 lake format. Like, obviously it all worked out, but had it not, I still love that. That's a cool, interesting new spin to tournaments. But I was really a little bittersweet about it when I was catching them so well and so dialed, doing exactly what I love to do, on Chickamauga, catching them offshore. And
sure.
And it seemed like I had that really dialed in, from the competitor standpoint. I'm sure Wheeler was probably holding back a little bit. All we had to do was just qualify through that. And I'm not sure Wheeler wasn't smart enough to know or thinking ahead far enough to not want to make that auto bid into the championship round. Again, as we've all seen, that's really kind of a more of a hindrance once you get to the championship round. Like, you're guaranteed a top 10, but you're almost guaranteed like 8th to 10th place if you make that auto bid, because you're losing a day of learning and more or less. I mean, it's not practice, but you are practicing. You're learning. You're garnering information about that lake for that given day that's going to help you build a better game plan for tomorrow. And so when you don't get that, you're just that much further behind. You're literally 8 or 9 hours behind the other 9 competitors. And so, he wasn't catching them real well. However, I didn't ask, but for all we know, he was kind of laying up and just, not even trying. But super fortunate to, again, not win that auto bid. I was probably more upset about that than I would have finishing second at Nickajack, only because that's my deal. Like, that's my jam out there, and in the middle of the lake and chasing those schools down. That's what I've always done. There aren't very many things that, and I say this in the most humbling way possible, because all of these guys are incredibly good. They've all got their little niche and kind of what they're really good at, although they're good at everything, that we can do. But I feel like I've got an advantage. Like, you're living in my world when those bass are out there and doing, doing the TVA stuff. And so I was really like, I just felt like I should have won that hands down. And again, just the Lord's work there. He didn't need me to do that, didn't want me to, and super, super fortunate that it all worked out. Again, every tournament, every major win that I've had, it's always seems to be that way. Like, it never works out exactly the way you strategized it or envisioned or planned for it to, but it all happens for a reason, and most of the time those reasons will lead you to victory. So really special.
It was all just kind of meant to be. It felt like the whole week for you. Even, I believe it was day 3. I remember this text going out. Chris sent it in our group chat. He's like, I think Jake Lawrence is absolutely smashing them. Hasn't even looked at MLF yet. I've gotten 100 texts from all my buddies. And he's at 100 pounds. And he had, like, what would you have the day before? Like 30 or something? Or
yeah. So really unique. Scenario that took place on day 1 of qualifying. Again, well versed in the TVA offshore school thing, and that day 1 qualifier was the first time I believe I have ever seen the current generation at 0, none, zilch, not a
0
coming 0 from, I think it was like 10 to 1 o'clock that day. And so when we started that morning, they were pulling 10 or 12, enough to keep them out there. They were schooled up, they were grouped, but it was not the big ones. Like, I only had, let's just call it 15. It was somewhere in there, 15 scorables on the first day. I bet I caught 70 or 80. Like, I caught a pile of fish all day long. They just all turned into little bitty peewees.
Yeah.
And by halfway through the second period, they completely vanished. Like, when that current generation went to 0, and on top of 0, no current generation, the wind was blowing really hard out of the southwest, which is blowing back up the lake. So the current generation was actually backwards. Like, the lake was flowing back upstream, and it really broke all of those schools apart. I had 2 schools that were on what is generally the upstream side of a little point, and kind of the opposite of where they should be. But however, in this particular situation, with the current flowing back upstream, those are now the down current side, which is where you want them to be. And so I caught most of what I caught out of those 2 places, and really kind of got me through, that particular day. But really frustrating. I mean, it was not at all like practice. I could idle over a school and, I'd poke around, look, make sure nobody was around, and I'd bomb this new little plug we've got coming from Bill Lewis and crank it down there, and it would immediately just lock up. I caught a double on a lead shed. Like, just, if I made a cast in practice, it was something silly happening, and I thought, this is going to be the craziest weights anybody's ever seen in terms of largemouth. Like I thought it really might hold up to a St. Lawrence, a St. Clair, weight wise and scoreable numbers, because if I made a cast in practice, I just about caught a scoreable. It was incredible, and it just the way it all transpired and happened. It just is what it is. I adapted. I even went. I'm talking. I got so desperate, and I hope everyone listening knows how much I love offshore fishing, and I'm not going to do it to a fault. If they're not out there, I'm not gonna, I'm not gonna try. But if it's happening, you don't even ask. Like, that's where I'm gonna be. If there is a bite out there, that's what I'm gonna do. And halfway through the second period, I went and skipped boat docks with a Nicarama. Like, it was bad.
Wow.
I had no idea. And what I was really doing there was just sampling to see, did these fish go to the bank? Like, did they, is there another bite happening? Is there something that's transpiring? Because I didn't know if these fish would show back up for the next day, for day two of the qualifier. And so, I somewhat practiced, kind of figured out that wasn't the deal, and just had to go back out there and make what we had left count. And again, day two of the qualifier, everything kind of went back to normal. The wind didn't blow near as hard, back upstream, and they pulled 14 or 15,000. It was enough to set those schools up and really allow us to get to work that morning. I caught. So what was cool about Chick, TBA offshore tournaments can be somewhat a little bit frustrating these days, because we're all so good with our electronics. We all understand where these fish school up and the ambush points that they use. And so it gets oftentimes pretty crowded. This one was probably the perfect storm. There were enough fish up shallow that it kept a lot of guys that wanted to do that. It kept them busy and kept them content up there. And a lot of guys never even went out there and looked. And they weren't super easy to find. Like, they weren't all out on the river channel. A lot of them were on that in-between stuff, that call it 8 to 12, 13 range. And then you would have the oddball big school that would be out in 25. I even caught some of the deepest TBA bass I've ever caught in like 35. Might have even caught one in like 38 on the second qualifier. And
it's insane.
So really unique. It's just where they were actually set up on like the side. It was a real vertical edge, and they were all dotted up like down the lip, down the side, not up on the lip like they normally would be. And the top of that thing was in like 23 or 4, and I could cast out into the river channel and let my little swimmer sink to the bottom 40, 45 feet and start working it back uphill, and then get about halfway up that ledge there, and we caught a bunch of big ones out of that school. But again, a perfect scenario where you had both shallow schools, kind of that sneakier, harder to find in between stuff, and you also had some big schools, out on the river channel that were a little bit further along. And I always, one tip that I probably ought to keep this one close to my chest, but we'll let the cat out of the bag. Anytime that you've got multiple schools, let's say for a tournament, if I'm not fishing a tournament and I'm just out fun fishing on the TBA when they're offshore, I'm probably not even going to put the boat in until 9 o'clock, because it's an afternoon deal. The sun needs to get up. The generation schedule is usually more oriented to the afternoons, and that's just kind of when things happen. But in a tournament, obviously we've got to make it happen during the given hours that we're that we have to. And so one tip that I'll give everybody listening is start on your shallowest school, unless you have got the absolute tournament winning school and there's pretty good opportunity. Somebody else has found it. In that case, you may have to go out there and just kind of sit on the school and wait for them to group up and kind of, hope that everything works out in that way. But if you can, always start on the shallowest school that you have. And so I had 28 schools going into the event. I had about a dozen of them that were in that like 9 to 13 range. And so I started at the very first, not necessarily my best school by any means, but I started at the first shallow school that I got to when I ran up the lake from Chester, and just started working those shallow schools all the way up to almost what's the bridge up there right before the Hiawassee? Right where the lake splits.
I know what you're talking about. Yeah, I don't know the exact bridge name.
The lake as well, but
wow, you had them way up there too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow.
Yeah. So it seemed like the further, if you went up the lake from Chester Frost, there were a lot more. They were further along. There were more post spawners, fewer fry garters, very very few late, deep spawners. If you went downstream from Chester, there were a lot more fry garters, a lot more deep spawners, and fewer schools. The schools that were there were like bigger in numbers, not necessarily size, but there were more fish in them. But you would go forever without finding one, and I just don't think there were very many out down there. I say that I had like 10 or so, and I'm sure
that's it, just 10.
Guarantee you there are more of them that I just I missed, or they showed up a day after I looked at that particular place, or whatever the deal is there. But I wanted to run my shallow schools first. I caught a lot of them early that morning on an MR12 Bill Lewis. It's a great medium diving plug. It's kind of a narrow lipped crankbait, which is something that I like. In these schools, you can reel that thing so fast and it doesn't blow out. I'll be 100% honest. It will get hung like around timber and stumps and things like that. But that narrower style bill, I don't really know what we'd call that. But it allows me to wind that bait extremely fast. And the one thing that I can tell you, immediate post spawn with these offshore schools is speed is king. Anything that I was throwing, I caught a few on a Carolina rig to kind of clean a school or two up, but for the most part, everything that I caught them on I was winding it as fast as I possibly can, whether it was that MR12, a little single powder tail swim bait, a hair jig. It had to be something that really zipped by his head and got him kind of excited and
got him chasing
going at it. And oftentimes the fish that would immediately go at your bait was not the one that would get it, but it would trigger the rest of the school to get excited and all kind of come up there and look at what was happening. So caught a lot of them on the Citrus Shad MR12. Another big key with every fish format, every single bite matters. And I kind of had a two-pronged approach with my plug there. I would start with a Citrus Shad. I always like to start with the most aggressive bait, the most aggressive color that they'll eat. And then once they're inevitably, whether you catch, 5 or 50 of them, at some point they're going to wise up and get pretty smart. And if you start loud, if you start aggressive, and even with colors, very, very aggressive with your coloring, you can oftentimes, go stealthy immediately after, whether it, go silent, in this case, I went from the Citrus Shad to a lavender shad. It's kind of a pinkish, purplish back on it, real translucent color. And I could immediately follow that up after the Citrus Shad when they would stop biting it. And it was never something that I could totally reignite the school, but I could always catch like 1 or 2 more. I probably caught an additional 8 or 9 scorables on the lavender shad that I simply would not have been able to catch, had I not done that. And then I would go to a swim bait, and then I would go to a hair jig, and then I would go down to a Carolina rig, and just kind of stair step my way down in techniques from, again, the biggest, the gaudiest, the most aggressive down to, the least. It seemed like I really couldn't get, in this format, you would think, a drop shot with a 6 or 7 inch robo worm, or, some of these things that generally, will get you a lot of bites. If they got too good of a chance to look at it, like our scope shad, at one point, I bet I had 30 bass. Like I had a string. If this is my scope shad, I had 3 bass deep from my scope shad all the way back down to the bottom. There's no way it wasn't 30 bass. And
They're just looking at it. Bite it.
oh my
bite
goodness. I'm doing everything. I'm reeling it, I'm jerking it. I'm doing everything imaginable, and they simply won't bite it. And anytime that you see that, you know that is not the bait that particular school wants. If more than 2 or 3 get on my bait and don't bite, that's not the right bait. I don't care what it is.
Well, what do you do?
It may be
that. Like that happens a lot when you're TVA ledge fishing for sure. You got like, for instance, I was on Gunnersville on I think Sunday, and like, dude, we would have 20 looking at my scope shad or big jerk minnow, and like, what do you follow it up with whenever you have that many fish following your bait? You're like, bite it, just bite it. What's your next go-to bait right away?
So it all there's not there's not a great answer to that. I'm gonna try to answer it to the best of my ability because it's all based on what I'm seeing. So when I have like minnow fishing, kind of what we're talking about here, they're so bad about getting on it and following and not biting. I have a couple different things that I can do to just assess the mood of that fish with my scope shad. In other words, like once he gets on it and I'm working it and he gets right in there behind it and just kind of cruising at the same pace as my scope shad, a lot of times I'll reel it 2 or 3 times real quick, or I'll hop it up real fast. Like I'm trying to see, I'll try 2 or 3, maybe even 4 different things. I'll even open my bail and just let it sink and go to the bottom. And whatever you see him get the most excited about. Again, a lot of times he still won't bite it, but if I hop it up and he doesn't really do much, he just kind of inches forward. If I reel it real fast, kind of like a hair jig away from him, and he just kind of eases up there, gets back close to it. And all of a sudden I open my bail, and as soon as my scope shad starts to sink to the bottom, he really surges down and gets right on my scope shad as it's sinking and as it gets to the bottom. Even if he doesn't bite it, I know at least that fish was in the mood to bite something on the bottom. So for whatever reason, the bait falling got more interest than anything else. And so in that case, I'd pick up a big buckeye, like a mop jig, or a Carolina rig, an okie worm, something that's more bottom oriented, something I could hop up or drag in front of those fish. Vice versa. Like if I wound it a few times real fast and that's what, got the reaction and got him really fired up, I might throw a hair jig. I might throw a single swim bait and wind it through there really, really fast. And so it all just kind of is dictated on the reaction of, usually 1 or 2 fish in, if we're talking still a group of fish, usually you don't have to do it to all of the fish in there. You do it to 1 or 2 of them, they'll all act pretty similar. Like for whatever reason, I don't know how they communicate all that, but whatever excites one of them will almost always excite the rest of the school. And you might go to the next school a half a mile down the lake, and whatever was working at the last school is not what this school wants. But once you dial in what triggered one bass in that new school, you can duplicate it. And so it really is all about reading the fish. Before prior to forward facing, you were simply just having to do that and envision kind of what was going on out there. And as soon as you would make a change of some sort, if you got a bite doing that, I would know, okay, that's what triggered him. And,
that's what you do
you would just, again, replicate that as many times as possible. You just didn't know if one was on it or one was looking or what was really negative, because that, again, with forward facing, to me, that is what I've learned probably more than anything else is simply the negatives and the things that you don't want to do in a given day. With your bait,
what bass are doing
presentation wise, you can see when a fish loses interest so easily, and you go, "Ooh, I'm not doing that again." That didn't work. And before, you might have to do that for an hour or 2 hours to finally tell yourself, okay, they don't want a long pause on a jerk bait, or whatever the situation may be. It's just forward facing really allows us to see and understand scientifically like what is happening there. We're not guessing anymore, as far as a reaction and kind of what they want, what they don't like.
You basically get information every time you get a bite, but with the help of forward facing sonar, the amount of information that you're collecting on each bite is
It's
you know,
100-fold.
yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly. I
incredible.
don't have to get a bite anymore. And look, I still, like, even when I'm not utilizing it up shallow, if I pull into a little pocket and don't get a bite in there, it doesn't, I don't, immediately say, okay, there were no bass in there. But at the same time, it's like you kind of log that back in the memory and go, okay, we didn't get a bite in there. Like we either didn't generate one or they're not there, or you kind of assess the situation. And again, if you can utilize forward facing to tell you, I always have it on in practice. They'll allow us to use it all day, every day in practice, and that is so helpful in efficiency and just learning a new body of water. Most of these fisheries that are on the BPT schedule this year, I don't have any experience on, and so I'm really trying to dial in this lake for the very first time when we get there. And again,
2 days of practice usually.
right, 2 days of
a lot of
practice,
time.
and exactly, and forward tells me just as much where they aren't as where they are, and that's something that doesn't get talked about a whole lot. Everybody wants to talk about, I found them over here, I found them over there, and it's like, yeah, but you stopped at 15 places and didn't find them, and that all led you to where you did. And so again, it's all just an efficiency thing, and it certainly, without question, has made us all more efficient. As anglers, I can't emphasize that enough. It gets somewhat
100%.
overshadowed.
So kind of going back to the first day, I've always wondered this myself. When you said you went up shallow and they had no current going, what do the bass – this might be the $1 million question that no one knows the answer to, but what do you think the bass do when they're offshore and they have no current going, they're not set up? Like even first thing in the morning, when you pull up to your school, there was 300 bass there, white bass, everything mixed in, and now there's 10. Like where do those fish go in the nighttime or when there's no current? Like what is going on?
So that is something that I am still somewhat, dialing in, and out of anything that happens offshore, that is the one that I have the least amount of experience, because I'll be honest with you, most of the time when they're not around, when I say not around, I don't mean I idle right over my waypoint and say, okay, boys, they're not here today. Let's go to the next school. Like I will.
Yeah.
I will look, really hard throughout that area, and let's see if they went out further, went in, went upstream, downstream. There's a lot of options they can do. But usually when that happens and you don't find them, I simply go to a new area. Yeah. What I do and have started to dial in and figure out is those fish don't go anywhere real far. They just get up off the bottom and they get away from each other. So they'll all get up and suspend and just kind of float around. Call it it's different, in each area. There's different offerings and opportunities there. So, one school may swim a half a mile. And I say school, like the group will break apart and as a whole kind of, swim over there. Some of them, I don't think, go more than 100 yards. They all just scatter out and get, a couple feet under the surface, anywhere from call it 2 to 10 feet under the surface and roam around. Again, going back to forward facing, that is something that we have learned more so than anything in terms of where bass live. There are so many more bass that roam out in open water, largemouth that roam out in open water. We always knew they were out there, but never to the extent the population density and the time that they stay out there. It's a big portion of their life. They're out there roaming around over
in the middle of nowhere, right?
The abyss, exactly. And so, long time ago, way before forward facing, I got the bright idea one July day there on Kentucky Lake, and I said, man, why am I out here? I got all the sea doers, the wake boats, all the mess going on. The sun's beating down on me. Why am I doing this? Why don't we just come out here and scan for these schools at night when nobody's out here? Nobody's going to see you. Of course, we were all super sneaky trying to hide schools and all that. And I guarantee you, I wish Crispin was on this podcast. I hope he's listening. And if so, I guarantee you he has done this exact same thing. I don't know anybody on Kentucky Lake, good offshore fisherman, that hasn't gotten this idea and said, I'm just going to go out here and scan for them at night. They are not there. Like
They're not there.
literally not a bass anywhere on the bottom. They're all up floating around and kind of doing their deal. And it's really, kind of to bring that full circle. So the first morning of the first qualifying day, the first morning night, of course, we get a 30-minute ride around.
Yeah.
I only had about an 8-minute ride to my first school. And when I got there, it was, we don't blast off at daylight. We're, 7-ish, 7:15, something like that. And so the sun's already up, but it's not like above the trees, so to speak. And sunlight is super, super important with these offshore fish. And so this was the biggest school, the biggest shallow school that I had, that I knew I could fire up, pretty early in the morning, had potential to be there that early. And so I rolled up and I kind of eased through my little area, and I saw 10 in one little bitty cluster. I said, all right, that's to be expected this early in the morning. Like, I'm going to start on this 10. And I decided strategically to utilize my forward facing in the first period, the first day, because again, that's when these schools are the most fickle. They move around a lot early in the morning, kind of before they get settled and situated. And so I wanted to utilize it, not to be able to like pick out a fish, cast to that fish and catch him, but I basically just wanted to be able to pan up there and say, okay, there they are at 1 o'clock, and making an efficient cast, and know I was keeping
know where they're at
around these fish. And so I had my scope turned on, and I marked the school. I cut the boat off. I spun back around. I shined my scope back up there. They'd all, they were all still sitting there. Sometimes you'll bust them up with a big motor, that mercury idling over them. And so I backed up, maybe call it like 30 feet or so, just far enough like where my transducer wasn't pinging on them. And I just hit spot lock. And I wanted to stay close enough where if somebody wanted to pull in, I can make sure and get the right angle of the cast that I wanted to make to that little group. And so I'm just standing there where I'm jawing with my official. We're having a big time. I'm all fired up, And
I'm about to smash him today.
It's so, man, it's like you're so amped up, but all you can do is just stand there with your arms crossed and just wait. In this case, I waited like 15 minutes, 20 minutes, felt like an eternity. But I was literally, we were talking, we were having a conversation, and I literally looked down to see what time it was on my graph. And of course, I've still got my scope on, and the spot lock was readjusting, and that head was panning around, and all of a sudden there was like 40 of them. Oh my goodness. I took it off spot lock and just sat there on the school, and I literally, and this is, I can't make this up, this is the first time I've ever seen a school literally form as I'm sitting there with forward facing and watching. They started at 10, and of course that spotlight wasn't paying a whole lot of attention, and then it turned to like 40-ish. By line's end, there were like 200 of them sitting there. It was like every time you would pan over, like that side of the school would just get bigger and bigger and bigger. And it's like, we are fixing to obliterate them. Like they were all getting down on the bottom. The sun, in that 15-minute window, the sun had finally gotten up over those trees, and it settled everybody down. It was a really cool experience, even outside of a tournament. That was a really cool thing for me to see, and something so that cool. We always knew happened, but like it's so rare that you're not affecting the school. Like I don't know if those fish would have done that had I already been casting in them. Like how often do you pull up to a school and just sit there for 15 minutes and not cast?
Never,
so,
right?
Yeah, exactly. You're always fired up and ready to get in there, and so it was really cool. As soon as I wound that MR12 to the bottom, I don't think it was on bottom that far. And I scoreboard locked it up, and I said, "Yep, here we go, boys. This is the first of many, And it really, honestly, I caught a bunch of them there. Again, just that first day, it was really hard to catch scorables. None of the big ones were there. I really think when the storms we had, the current or lack of current, everything kind of going against us. The bigger ones are always the first to make a move. When something changes, and look, this is not just TVA offshore. This is anywhere, anytime. When the conditions change and something's not right, the biggest ones in that area are always going to be the first ones to leave it. And they're always the most leery and like Obviously, the bigger they are, generally the older they are, the more experienced, the more they've probably seen what's happening, and they know what to do to combat it. And so it was just an extremely tough day for big ones. And again, my hands are still like I'm just now reforming skin on my thumbs, and we caught an absolute metric pile of them. Just most of them were 1.6s, 1.8s, plenty of 1.15s. And super, super happy to get some redemption there on the second qualifying day. Everything went pretty well, exactly the way that I needed them to go. I do. The MR12 comes with, fantastic hooks, the kind of triple grip style hooks.
Yeah.
However, when I'm winding a bait, what I call psycho cranking, which is you wind it as hard as you possibly can.
Psycho cranking.
I have found that a round bend treble will get them to bite, and not get them to bite, but it will hook them better. Again, when I'm humming that crankbait, whether it's an MR12 or this new deep plug, I know y'all seen it, and I don't know if you've had a chance to throw it yet, but I'm pretty pumped about it. Looking forward to releasing that at ICAST. Anytime that I am winding extremely fast, which is most of the time, offshore post spawn period, I like a round bend hook. I was throwing that Owner ST35. It's just again, the points are more outwardly, facing, and when I'm psycho cranking like this, they oftentimes don't get an opportunity to like pin the bait to the bottom. They're just trying to catch up to it, and a lot of times they nip the back hook, and that round bend is usually something that I will change now in the wintertime, or I shouldn't say winter, but the colder months, call it November through March. I oftentimes like that kind of closed style to hook. It really pins them once you get them hooked. It really, really pins them, and they don't jump off. You don't lose them. It's just when I'm reeling it really, really fast, I need to have something there that if he just sniffs it, we're going to get him by a piece of skin. And I caught a 512, a 5.8, a 5.6, and a couple high fours that morning, all with one hook. God! They would come up jumping way out there, holding it, crushing. You could see that MR12 slapping around. It's like, oh my gosh!
How many times do you also like crankbait like that though? They just come skyrocketing up,
straight up. Especially when they're that shallow. When they're in 8 or 10, 12 foot of water, it does not take long to get to the surface. Super fortunate that I only lost one bass that, again, good fortune that I lost it, or I would have won the qualifier. But super fortunate to catch all of those. Usually, it's just kind of a numbers deal. You catch enough good ones with a plug or any treble hook bait, a lead shad, anything of that nature, you're going to lose a couple. Like when I woke up that morning, I knew I was going to lose a couple. It's part of the business. It's part of that game out there. And the key is just to generate enough bites that those all kind of wash themselves out and become irrelevant. But super fortunate that morning, we were really able to bang them pretty hard on the MR12. And about halfway or maybe an hour into the second period, they just kind of got weird to the plug. I don't really know. I did start fishing some of my deeper schools, but I was throwing a plethora of deep plugs through them as well. And I really had to kind of change gears and go to more of a swim bait, a scrounger, mixed it up, through a Carolina rig. Just kind of had to figure out what each school wanted, and was able to get 7 or 8, 9 more schools to fire pretty good for me. And I had one school in particular that, again, that super deep school that I had one cast on that entire school. It was one of the biggest schools that I had that week. Several hundred fish in and a lot of whites. Like, there's no tell. You can put a number on how many whites were in that school. But
100 fish. That's incredible.
Yes, hundreds. And but there was out of, and I keep emphasizing that because when there's 100 or 200 or 300 bass in a school, they're not all sitting, in an area the size of this table. Like, they're pretty scattered out. They were stretched over a 60 or 70 yard, stretch there. And I had exactly one cast. I had, my waypoint where I would spot lock the boat, and I had one tree on the opposite river channel over there, riverbank that I could cast at and generate a bite. And what was happening where I was putting that bait on that one cast is I still don't know, but it was the only cast. There were multiple people, that were fishing that school, but nobody had found that one cast. And that's something that, for anybody listening, when you find one of these groups, most of the time your first cast in there from just about any angle, you're gonna catch one. But if you have a hard time to either get them to fire, or again, like we talked about at the beginning of this podcast, angles for whatever reason can be very, very impactful to the memory of a fish. I guess I still don't understand, like, scientifically, if they've just learned that when something comes from that direction over there, don't bite it, like that's not good, or if the bait acts differently. I mean, I have even had this happen on a drop shot, and you think, how does that even matter? You're not even moving a drop shot. How does the angle change make any difference? But I've seen it not just once, but like a lot more than I'd like to admit. And so, do
you think it's because it's like facing a different way, or does it just catch them off guard? Like I don't know.
It could be. I mean, generally speaking, when they're generating current, they're all, not like soldiers perfectly, in a line, but they're all, upstream angled in some way. They're not facing downstream, or they'd be getting pushed, with the current, and so they're usually facing upward stream, in that general direction. But yeah, it does something. It will elicit a reaction out of them and kind of oftentimes refire a school. So anytime that you've got a school, you're having trouble getting them to bite, or you've already caught several and you need to catch a couple more, don't cast. So this is a huge critical deal to it. When you decide, okay, I'm going to change my angle, don't make another cast until you get all the way around to where you want to make that, the complete angle change. It seems like if they see that angle change in little small increments as you're trolling around, it's not as impactful. But if it's a 180 angle change, my bait's been coming this way, and now all of a sudden, the very next time they see it, it's coming from a 180 degree change, it will cause them to react. And again, I found the exact right cast and caught a 710, couple more times. So oddly enough, like I say oddly, it's really cool. I had high 20s both the second qualifying day and the championship round in my best five. Of course, I would always do that in an every fish counts format when it doesn't matter and nobody even knows about it. But
exactly,
super cool. Yeah, I caught a ton of high 20 bags and several 30-pound bags offshore. But to do it in a tournament is always special. I've done it even a few times in tournaments. I've yet to break 30 pounds, in a 5-fish format. And I need to go back and do the numbers. I may have done it then. And it doesn't matter. It's irrelevant. It's just kind of one of those things that irks me. It's like, as many high 20 bags as I've caught cannot break 30 yet. Like for instance, we had a right here. I'm at Pickwick getting ready to fish the Invitational, and Monty McWilliams, my old fishing partner, owner of Mallard Estates. We fished a Toyota Team Series event here 2 falls ago and had over 30. We had 3 for 21 in September. I had like a 9.5 pounder. We had a great. So our other 2 were big as well. Like we were culling some big ones that day. And it's like, of course, I catch 30 pounds in a tournament when it's a 3-fish tournament and you can't weigh 30 pounds.
Of course, right?
It's just one of those that, like, it's just got my number right now, and we'll get us a dirty 30.
You'll be here
format somewhere. We might do it this week. I don't know. It's been awfully stingy out here on Pickwick this week, but I look forward to things changing in the tournament. So
hey, you're gonna catch them. I know you got to go pretty soon, but we keep saying that this whole week was meant to be for you, Jake. we haven't even really touched on you almost getting struck by lightning. Like that video is insane, dude.
Yes. That was. I'm glad you brought that up. I tried to forget about that. That was the spookiest, the most scared moment. I have spent hundreds and hundreds, thousands of days on the lake, and I had some wild things happen, some kind of weird stuff, and had a couple close calls with various, as we all have. I mean, you do anything.
Everyone.
As much as what we do this, you're going to have some situations that come about. And, day two, no, that was day one, I believe. That was day one.
Okay. Day one,
of the qualifier, I believe, because it was raining. Yeah, it was raining that day. Either which way, it's been a whirlwind of a week. One of those days.
You've been nonstop.
We had this. We have this storm, pretty powerful thunderstorm rolled in over I guess that would be the western side of the lake, like the Chester Frost side up to Dayton and up there. And I was up the lake around like Salty Creek area when I could start hearing the thunder popping and see the lightning and all that. And I sat there on that particular school and just kind of assessed where the storm was moving to. And because I had schools literally from almost where the Hiawassee dumped in all the way down to, a quarter of a mile from the dam, from Chickamauga Dam. And so I knew I could find a way to dodge this storm and still keep myself relevant and continue to be productive. And so I just kind of sat there for 10 or 15 minutes and assessed where the storm was going, which direction. And I made my call and made about a 5 or 6 mile run, obviously, to where I thought was going to be safe. The sun was out. Like the video and the photos that I'm sure everybody's seen doesn't really do it justice when I say it was sunny, because it's looking back towards the storm. Like the storm is on the opposite side of the river, and there were, again, like it was sunny. Had my sunglasses on. It was hot. I thought, man, I'm good right here. Like we were catching them. Like it was, it was a good decision. Not only did I stay safe, but we caught a few scorables out of that school, and I was having a good time. And wildest thing I have, again, we've all had our line float. I've even had my popper suspend in the middle of the air one time on Kentucky Lake. Like, I've had my rod buzzing. Like I've been shocked, minor shocks a little bit when it's kind of building in an area. There was zero warning to this lightning strike, zero. And that is what scares me the most about it, is to know that that's now like possible. Like I always just assumed, well, as long as you're smart, like you get warning, like you're gonna feel it, you're gonna see your line, right. Some indication that lightning, electricity is building in this area. We'll always give it away, and you can simply make your decision, obviously get out or take the risk, and we're always obviously going to get out of the way. And there was no warning whatsoever. I had one local, call it 40 yards from me. We had the drone boat. So there's a camera boat that just flies the drones. And then I had a still photographer, maybe another 30 yards. So they were just outside of casting range for me. On a long bomb cast with that MR12, 60 yards, 70 yards. They were probably 80 yards from us, something like that. So there's 4 boats in a little bitty, no more than a football field size area. And that lightning struck exactly in between me and the still photographer at the lowest point out of anything out there. There's a drone flying in the air. Obviously, I've got my rod in the still photographer standing up taking photos. Like, we got 2 locals, like all the opportunities for that lightning to go or places for it to go. And it chose literally dead center in the middle of all of us. It was really more the still photographer and myself were the 2 closest. And you want to talk about popping you on top of the head. I have never, my wife has gotten on to me a few times, but she's never popped me like that one did. It's all in good fun. I'm only kidding, guys. Only kidding. But it really did. man, it sent a jolt of it actually. I was wearing this hat, and it popped me right there on that little hard
On the metal, right?
Yeah, I think it is, and there's something really hard. It popped me, zapped me really hard right there, and did all of us. But got the still photographer and his camera boat or his boat driver and my official the worst. It was the closest to us. And the
Oh my
wildest thing for
God.
like another 45 minutes or an hour, it felt like we of course talked about it after the day, and it felt like
Yeah.
you had spiders crawling in your hair.
Oh,
Like I
God.
still don't know what that was. It was, I mean, it just literally felt like my hair was crawling, was moving around, and we all felt the exact same thing. So really, really, again, I've kind of beat this to death, but so fortunate.
Yeah.
You know, just outside of fishing, who cares about all that? We've got to keep everybody safe and live to fish another day. And I have no idea, you know, how that happened, what you know, what really took place there for all of a sudden. Because again, I mean, there was no lightning within, call it 3 or 4 or 5 miles. It was far enough you would see the lightning, you know, 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi, wow. And then I mean it was a distance away, and again, lightning struck where the sun was shining, which I didn't even know was possible. But super fortunate the good Lord looked down on us in way more ways than just fishing last week. But you know, it's funny, every single win that I have ever had, that's by far the craziest as far as but like weird stuff always seems to happen. You know, and just good fortune, good things, you know, kind of transpire, and last week was no exception. It was probably the most extreme of all of my you know, tournament win stories, and kind of how the whole week went on. But one for the ages, one that I will certainly never ever be able to outlive and forget. That was a cast, a moment, a couple moments there in the week that will forever go down in my memory bank, and certainly, you know, what I am probably the most excited about, obviously the, you know, the victory and all of that is really exciting. But you know, let's face it, here in a couple of weeks, I will probably be the only one that's still thinking about that. And I understand that and know that. And you know, we've got a new week, a new job to do this week. And, you know, life moves on and all that. But so much positivity has come from this in the fishing community. So many people have reached out and with kind, you know, heartfelt words and you know, not just to me, but I talked to Wheeler the other day, and same for him, and you know, just a really good moment for bass fishing as a whole. I can't tell you how many elite guys have messaged me and said the same thing. It's just a really, really good you know, time for something like that to happen. I certainly don't want to go down you know, the old pity party, the you know, negative Nancy, but it's kind of been going in that direction, and we actually talked about this. I believe it was at the Classic. Like we needed, or we still do, you know, need something to kind of get the ball rolling in the other direction. And you know, fishing is fun. It's exciting. It's supposed to be, you know, all of those things that we've always, you know, dreamed of it and made it into. And it just seems like here lately, all anybody wants to talk about is conflicts and controversies. And to me, I avoid that like the plague. I try to focus on the job at hand and having fun and trying to be, you know, the person that I've always, let's face it, like forget the win this week or last week. How cool is it that I'm fishing the Bass Pro Tour against all of my idols and all the guys that you know, that I grew up watching? And literally I remember sitting on my dad's couch watching, you know, all these guys and going, oh, what I would do to be there. And to be a part of that, like I can't help but just wake up every morning and try to be a better person. Like if I'm given this opportunity, you know, I want to be the best ambassador for the sport that we can and try to steer this in the right direction as much as possible. And that win and kind of the way it all transpired last week was a jump start anyway. We've all still got a lot of work, but it's a step in the right direction for sure.
I don't think it could have happened to a better guy. And really, when was the last time it was a tournament was won on a buzzbait? We were talking about this yesterday. We talked for a while, Jake. Like, when was the last time someone won a major tournament on a buzzbait? I can't even remember.
I cannot remember. There's been a couple like key fish catches, but they caught the majority of them doing something else, or
Right.
something like that. But I as much as I am a student of the game and as closely as I follow it, I can't remember a major event that was won pretty well. You can't say solely, obviously. The Yamamoto D-Shad and Cinco had their place in time, and I, without those scorables, without every single scorable that we caught, we don't win. But without that bad dude right there, and I tell you, it's kind of funny. Joey was making fun of me yesterday. I was talking on the phone. We were preparing for this little podcast, and he could hear me throwing a buzzbait in the back. I actually caught a keeper while I was on the phone with him. And I told him, I said, I still got the same toad and buzzer on that I was throwing there at Nickajack. He said, what? You're still throwing the same buzzbait? You need to put that thing up. That needs to be on the trophy. I said, well, heck, no, this one, I know it bites. They bite. I'm confident. I know if I reel it by one, he's going to eat it. So it's hard for me to put it up. But I did cut it off this morning just in case we wanted to talk about it. One cool thing I do really quickly, I want to talk about on the Buzzerk, see if I can find a good way to show this. So the cool thing about the Buzzerk is it's really and my most favorite application or reason that I throw the Buzzerk over most any other buzzbait is it's got everything that I want in one buzzbait. So if really honestly, if I only wanted to carry this one, I'll throw the G-Buzz some when it's a little more finessey and I want to be a little stealthier. But the cool thing with this one is you'll notice the blade. I'm going to try to do this where we can see. The blade will actually come around and hit the head there, and it creates a really loud, aggressive clacking sound when that is what you're looking for. And if you'll listen back, I was honestly tuning this buzzbait. I was opening my arm here just slightly. That's a little too much. But I was opening it up to where it would become a little less aggressive. Again, those fish were in like 10 inches of water, and I just felt like with that blade clacking on the head, it's a really aggressive. You can hear it from, a long cast away. So water this deep and he's 5 feet over. Like, I almost think it's information overload. It was kind of too much for him. But you can literally go anywhere in the country. And regardless of kind of the mood of the fish, where they are at in the water column, if they're setting up deep, if it's muddy, I'm going to bend this wire back down and get this blade to where it'll clack the head. So it's, again, me packing wise, it's just a super easy, efficient. I've more or less got 2 buzzbaits in one there. The 1/4 ounce has got a slightly smaller blade than the 3/8. So again, I play with sizes there, which will give you different sounds. The 1/4 ounce is a little easier, just FYI. With the smaller blade on it, it is a little easier to skip. I have learned that. So there's some little intricacies to it, but you can literally take this buzzer and fill your box full, and it's going to cover just about every application that you need.
Heck yeah. Well, Jake, I honestly just thought of this. I should have thought of it before, but I think we should do a giveaway with your setup. So what rod were you using? What Dobbins rod was it? Was it the 713?
It is. It's the Caden 713. That is my all-purpose rod. It's my favorite buzzbait rod and spinnerbait rod. But honestly, for anyone out there that's just getting into bass fishing, or with a limited number of rods, maybe a kayak fisherman or someone that's not able to have 30 or 40 rods at their disposal, that Caden Series 713 is the best all-purpose. You can do it all. Again, it's not ideal for cranking, but I promise you I could catch them on it. It's not ideal for punching heavy matted vegetation, but I bet you I could reel one in. With that
your all-purpose rod, right?
It's just it's an all-around great rod. I throw big, heavy topwaters on that rod as well. I have a number of 713s ready, and also, you know, a big player last year in the invitationals was a 6-inch Yamamoto Cinco with a little nail weight in it. You know, Nico rig, kind of an oversized Nico worm, and I throw that on that 713 Caden as well with 30-pound braid and a 15-pound leader on a bait caster.
That's cool.
I've just got more control. That bait's 6-inch Cinco's got plenty of salt. It's plenty heavy enough to cast and skips really well on a bait caster. You know, with a 32nd or a 16th ounce nail weight in it. So great all around setup. I was throwing 30-pound Seagar Smackdown braid. I like the 30-pound for the castability. To me, rope is rope. Like braid is braid. You're not going to break it.
Gonna break it, right?
You could throw 20 even and be able to cast just a little bit further. My only problem with that is when you hook one, you know, that's such small diameter. When you get below 30-pound, it kind of bites into the spool a little bit, into your bait casting spools, and so I stick with 30 for the most part. I only flip with 40.
That's crazy.
I don't go crazy big. You know, frogging, I throw 30, maybe 40 if I have to. But to me, rope is rope, and 30 seems to kind of set the standard for most anything that I'm going to throw on a bait caster. And I was throwing that salty baits, reels, salty hundo. Again, can't say enough about you know, the castability and the spool size of that reel, yet it literally feels like a little Zebco. I mean, it's so small you can fit your entire hand around it. Joey, you'd swallow it. You got such big hands. you can fish with the goat. I got plenty of goats. That's the 150 size of the baits, reels, and that thing, it's an awesome cranking reel, but it's a big profile reel. It's got a lot of line capacity there, and it fits somebody more of your stature, you know, with a bigger hand. So I really like the small profile reels.
Awesome. So what I kind of want to do here is, I already have a picture of all your baits that you use. So I guess everyone, if they just want to head over to baits.com Instagram, tomorrow morning we'll post a picture of it and do a giveaway. Like, comment, share, you know, win Jake's winning setup on Nickajack Lake. And again, Jake, I'm going to let you go. I know you got to run over to your Pickwick meeting. Congrats.
This is our longest podcast, I think.
Yeah, this is our longest podcast. You're one of the easiest guys to talk to. I don't think it could have happened to a better guy in the fishing industry, and for it to be such a memorable catch in my mind.
I tell you, the most how do I put this into words? I guess the most meaningful, because I don't want anyone listening that has wrote me a little message or sent me something to think otherwise. But I can't thank you enough for that, because you know, to get a compliment on your fishing abilities is always great. That's always a little booster and something that you need from time to time. Yeah. But you know, I know that I'm doing things right when I have some of the people that have reached out to me and complimented me for who I am and what I'm about, and that's what's most important to me. Look, any bass that we catch is going to long be forgotten about, and who you are, what you do with your time, and you know, the platform that you're given. That's all I care about. I mean, I'm a fierce competitor. You don't want to sit down and eat lunch next to me, because I promise you I'm going to beat you at it. Like, whatever it is, I'm super competitive. But to me, at the end of the day, if I can help just one person, I would love to help many, many more. But if I can just help one person that day, even outside of fishing, has nothing to do. I just, again, so thankful that I've been given this opportunity to be where I'm at, and to, you know, be provided the platforms that we have here. And I just want to be a great student of the sport, and just a great person. That's what means more to me than anything in the world. And it has really, and again, I can't thank everyone enough for sending all those kind texts and you know, words of encouragement. It has been a wild week. We have gotten very little sleep and almost no practice out here on Pickwick, but we're going to go out tomorrow and have fun. And
you're going to catch them.
You know, yeah, we'll find. Hey, I tell you what, I have not mentioned this, but I hope that the bass bite as good as the mosquitoes are here on Pickwick, because I am getting mauled right now. I've been swatting. I got the fan going back here. They're buzzing all over me. I hope I can get half as many bass bites as I have mosquito bites while making this podcast. We'll be all right.
You will. You will. Well, Charlie, you got anything else?
No, man, just congrats again to Jake, and you got a lot of people pulling for you, and you gained a lot more fans after last week, I'm sure, and
For sure.
go smash them this week at Pickwick.
I can't thank y'all enough. Thank you so much for having me on, and let's do this again, guys. This was a lot of fun. Let's try to make this a monthly or every so often kind of deal. We'll pick out. I'd love to pick out a technique or something that a pattern, something that we can kind of run with and talk. Education is kind of my niche. I'm not a super funny guy. I'm not a Gerald. I'm not not super wild and crazy and entertaining in that form. However, I have, for whatever reason, built up a uniquely well-versed knowledge base of bass fishing, and this is what I've studied my entire life. And not that I know it all. I still learn stuff every single day. I'm always hungry to learn. By no means do I want anybody to think that I know it all, because that is not the case. But I have a ton of knowledge that's built up from history and time on the water that I would love to share with everyone. So if we want to do this more often, y'all let me know. I'd love to do it.
100%.
Awesome.
Definitely. I definitely want to go ledge fishing with you. That sounds like a fun time. You know what I mean?
Do it. I think we can schedule a GSM photo shoot. And we'll take a couple photos in the process of catching a whole bunch of bass.
I love that. Awesome. Well, thanks a lot, Jake. We had a lot of fun. Good luck this weekend, and congrats on a great win again. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Jake.
We'll see you. Bye.
Oh, there we go.